And I mean, I'm sure you come across this too. When I first started talking about my journey, I had some very angry inflammatory bowel patients that were so mad at me for saying that there could be any ownership of this disease because they liked the role of just saying, I'm sorry, poor me, I'm a victim. And again, I'm going to make some people angry by saying that, but I think it's important because the only way out is to own this and say, what can I do to change my path?
What does it take to get real results when dealing with chronic disease and to work with an actual MD doctor who has experience with not only disease, but getting massive results? Today, we answer that question. Dr. Jill Carnahan is our special guest that was diagnosed with both breast cancer and Crohn's disease and was able to change her mind, energy, her nutrition, find root causes that no one had talked to before, and completely reverse both. Today, we deep dive into her journey, how her life is now, and how we can all get real results learning with Dr. Jill. This is one you're not going to want to miss. Enjoy.
Dr. Jill, it's rare that I meet somebody who not only has the passion for functional medicine, but has also gone through the fire, the experience of having a life-threatening disease, having their life taken away, and then coming back from the fire and volcanic ashes of really serious disease to take back their life and help thousands of others. I'm so grateful to have you today to talk about that journey. And as a medical doctor, as a functional expert, as someone who was diagnosed Crohn's disease and found severe problems with mold, what was that first step in your journey that allowed you to start recovering from this?
Yeah, well, I just see the mutuality of our journeys, and it's been so fun to get to know you, Dane, because you bring the same joy and passion from someone who has survived the incurable, right? And the unexplainable and all those things that the doctors give us. So my journey goes back to growing up on a farm in central Illinois, one of 5 children, and a really overall healthy, lovely, beautiful childhood. But I think in hindsight, probably that farm was slowly killing me. You know, it was like the perfect ideal setting, a Norman Rockwell-esque kind of situation with surrounded by love, wonderful family, lots and lots of siblings. But unbeknownst to me, I think my journey started maybe even in utero with toxicity from my mother's womb. Wow. And we don't talk a lot about this, but I want to frame it because as you and I just started before the podcast, so often we get these labels, Crohn's or cancer or whatever else it is, and we assume that that's the end of the story. And the great thing about functional medicine and even the work that you do is going to the root and saying the question why did this happen? What happened? What was the trajectory that led me to this point? And if we know the trajectory and understand the why, we can go backwards and reverse engineer and actually see the incurable cured like you and I have seen. Maybe, remission, whatever word we want to use, but you and I don't have the symptoms of the thing that we were told was always going to be with us. And so I'd like to frame it because I have to go way back to say what things, insults on my body and genetics and how I expressed that led to the diagnosis of cancer at 25, aggressive breast cancer, and then 1 year later, the diagnosis of aggressive Crohn's disease, both which the doctors told me, this may kill you, right?
My gosh. I mean, and we were just talking about that idea of identity. I mean, when the doctors give us these identities, you have breast cancer, it's incurable, it could be life-threatening. You have severe Crohn's disease, it's incurable, it could be life-threatening. They don't know. No one knows. There's no one root cause, which we learn in functional medicine, but they don't know the root cause. So to say it's incurable is actually ignorant because you would have to know the root cause to say definitively it is incurable. And then I always, for everyone out there listening to this, if you're someone relating to Dr. Jill, I ask this, what can you cure? Name one thing in the world you can cure. Can you cure headaches? Can you cure gingivitis if you stop brushing your teeth? Can you cure bad days? Can you cure the flu? So I think we could really go back to take our power back. And I think, Dr. Jill, you obviously did that too. Another thing of what you just said, it's like I grew up on a farm with multiple children. Most of us are thinking, oh, I was born in New York City. I was born in Jersey. There's no sunshine. There's no soil. We're not eating from the farm. Yeah. But you actually found opposite, that some of that farm life, which we in our mind think, oh, that's why, actually didn't serve you. Can you speak a little bit more about that farm
Yeah, so
experience?
I love starting there because what again, this beautiful thing, we had organic vegetables from our own garden that was like a half acre. I mean, I remember as a little
What?
girl going out there
What?
and picking raspberries and picking peas and eating them. And like, so there was and my mother was a retired nurse to raise the five of us children.
Yeah.
And so there was this definite holistic bent to come from the soil, we get food from the soil, like this idea that we're part of this world. And this world is our bodies can heal if given the right nutrients. I kind of grew up with that mindset. But the thing that I didn't realize was on the farm in the 70s and 80s when I grew up, there was still a lot of organophosphates, pesticides, herbicides, and things that were used that really affected my immune system and my toxic load, which is an underlying factor in many, many chronic complex diseases, especially inflammatory bowel disease and autoimmunity, cancer, all the things that I've dealt with. So unbeknownst to me, probably in our well water, there was things like glyphosate, atrazine, toxic chemicals, and
Mm-hmm.
these have really significant effects on our gut microbiome,
Mm-hmm.
on our detox ability, and even on our cells that rapidly divide, so the risk of cancer. And like I said, I look back and I think my mom probably drinking that well water had a toxic load. And what we know now is the year that I was diagnosed with breast cancer, 2001, there was a study out of Canada that checked the cord blood of infants, so brand new babies into this world. And this is now over 20 years old. It showed 200 plus chemicals in every newborn baby. So we're being born into this world with a toxic load. And I think, again, no fault of my mother. She didn't know any better, but I was probably born with exposures. And then to get a cancer at that young of an age, that was part of the puzzle. So that's toxic load, and we can go into that. But what happened that's so interesting to your listeners is the perfect storm to develop. If I had to say, here's a recipe to develop inflammatory bowel disease, let me tell you how it happened. So my recipe was, number one, I got diagnosed with cancer, which is at that time, it was so aggressive. I was 25. They threw everything at me. So I had 3 drugs that were chemotherapeutic agents given at one time, in infusions every 3 weeks or so. I had 6 rounds of aggressive chemotherapy. I had multiple surgeries, and then I had radiation treatment. So pretty much everything they could throw at it. Now, what we know is so fascinating in hindsight, one of the drugs I had, which is common with chemotherapeutic agents, has as part of its mechanism of action creating a more permeable gut, like crazy. So
Of
cyclophosphamide
course, that's
was this
a
drug.
side effect. Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the crazy and cool thing at the same time. Part of its mechanism is to create intestinal permeability, which dumps LPS, the coating of bacteria, from our gut into our bloodstream. And that is, we already know, we could go down a whole hour on LPS as an immune inflammatory trigger. And that LPS is part of the trigger that creates an immune response that's more aggressive, that helps fight the cancer of all things, right? So there was a reason for this, but it makes perfect sense if someone like me, and then unbeknownst to me, I had the high-risk DQ2 gene for celiac disease, which makes me very aggressively respond to gluten. And I had a gluten-full diet. I'd become a vegetarian at 14 because I didn't like the taste of meat. In
Mm-hmm.
hindsight, I probably had low stomach acid, which made meat hard to digest. I had a zinc deficiency, which makes someone not really love the taste of meat. So all of those factors, I had a severe B12 deficiency from malabsorption and from probably the silent celiac diagnosis that didn't happen until after my cancer. So all those things. So you have a silent celiac that's having already permeable gut issues from gluten, unbeknownst to her. You have atrazine chemicals, glyphosate, that are disrupting the microbiome and creating more preferential growth of bad bacteria and killing off good guys like lactobacillus. You have an overgrowth of yeast happening unbeknownst to me because of a more high carbohydrate diet as a vegetarian. I didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
Then you throw in cyclophosphamide, you create a permeable gut, this dumping of the bacterial contents. And then on top of that, I had this gene called NOD2, which is a high risk gene for Crohn's disease. And what we know about this gene is it creates an abnormally aggressive response to a normal microbiome. So you open the floodgates of the gastromucosa to dump bacterial coatings into my bloodstream, and of course, I'm going to develop Crohn's disease. So it was really the perfect storm. And looking back, it makes so much sense of why I developed that. And that was kind of the starting point to go backwards and say, just like you do with your clients,
Yeah.
what things on this trajectory led to my label of Crohn's or colitis? And is there a way that I could reverse those triggers to my immune system so that the damage to the lining of the gut actually recedes and goes away?
That was so big. I think everyone needs to re-listen to what Dr. Jill just said. We're talking about lipopolysaccharides. Dr. Tom O'Brien does a ton of that. I actually have a podcast with him going over LPSs, the coating and the bacteria that are extremely inflammatory, the epigenetic issues, the NOD, DL, all of these things that make you prone to gluten. Me and you both, everyone in the 90s, and everything was gluten. Our cereal, our Lunchables, everything was gluten. And gluten is a toxic substance now, especially in Western world. We have to get rid of it. And as you said, it was this perfect concoction of what you're predisposed to, what was going on with the dysbiosis, the high carbs leading to more candida, which we know candida albicans is a serious problem.
Yes.
And the low stomach acid you're probably dealing with, taking medications that increased leaky gut. So all of those are being dumped into the bloodstream to cause an autoimmune reaction, right? And so it's that perfect storm. And how many of us, when they say to us, Crohn's and colitis is more of a genetic predisposal versus I look at it and go, well, how can it be genetic if we're dealing with an epidemic of so many 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds being sick? There are other factors. So even though you had genetic predisposition, it was everything else that really turned the fire hose on, and you were able to turn it off. So it's not a genetic issue. It's an environmental issue. And we can, even though genetics load the gun, we pull the trigger. And so I think
love that you
so
clarify
much
that, because so often what happens in medicine, sadly, and again, I am a product of this allopathic system, although I feel like I've survived despite it.
I was very curious about your journey in that too. We'll get to it.
Yeah, but the thing that you mentioned is so important, because what happens is we are told that the doctor knows best. We're given this diagnosis, and then we're given no autonomy or agency to change. And I think until you really know what you and I know, it is easier in some ways, and I'll clarify this, to be the receptor of a diagnosis and you have no say in it. You're like, oh, this is what I have. It's my life. There's nothing I can do. In some ways, it's easier than taking responsibility. But the key is the empowerment and the agency, as hard as it is to say, okay, what part did I play in this? And what can I do to change that trajectory? That may be hard because you have to own it. You have to own that I have responsibility in this disease and I can change this. So it gives you empowerment. But at the same time, you have to own it and not be a victim. And I mean, I'm sure you come across this too. When I first started talking about my journey, I had some very angry inflammatory bowel patients that were so mad at me for saying that there could be any ownership of this disease because they liked the role of just saying, I'm sorry, poor me, I'm a victim. And again, I'm going to make some people angry by saying that, but I think it's important because the only way out is to own this and say, what can I do to change my path?
Yes, you're right. And I think something that can help when I talk about that, but helping people find their path, is realize there's a difference between fault and responsibility.
Correct.
And even if you've been sick for 30 years, even though you've had the disease longer than me, perhaps, you haven't tried 1/10 of what I've done. You haven't researched 1/10 of what I've done, even though you've had it twice as long. I got diagnosed 15 years ago, and I see that. Oh, I'm 55. I got diagnosed at 18. I've had 4 surgeries, failed 5 biologics. Nothing works. What are you going to teach me, Boy Scout? And that can be part of it, and say, look, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And that's the only way. And until you take full responsibility, you're not going to get the life you want. And after a while, if you go through so much pain, it is easier to identify it. Like your Instagram handles, the Crohn's girl, or the Crohn's guy, or, all of a sudden I am Crohn's colitis instead of I am experiencing something that the doctors identify as Crohn's colitis. Because it's just one trajectory away from, or one pivot away from, I don't know. You go to the doctor, you say, what's inflammatory bowel disease? They say it's chronic inflammation in the bowel. Say, what causes that chronic inflammation in the bowel? We don't know. So IBD equals IDK. And if the doctor had come in and said, hey, you have chronic inflammation in the bowel, it can be really bad. We don't know what causes it, but we can give you a steroid, an antibiotic, or an immunosuppressant. Do you want some? And then you went out to the world and said, hey, I've got chronic inflammation in the bowel. No one knows what causes it. Imagine. We would be so much more empowered and so much more like studying and trying and come together as a team, instead of, you can't change the identity of this, and your doctor said you have what I would have, so you need to have my experience.
Right.
Yeah,
that judgment around.
It's anger and pain. It's just a wrap of anger and pain, and usually 10, 20 years of it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I
that's,
really
yeah.
love what you said about identity because we can flip that. And again, you and I always speak the same language. I love this so much because what I know most about habits is habits come from who we identify as. So, for example, if I am a non-smoker and I am a celiac patient,
Yeah.
there's no question when I'm offered bread or cigarettes, if I don't, that's not me, right? I don't have to make any decisions. There's zero power there because I am a non-smoker. That's my
Yeah.
identity.
Hmm.
I'm a celiac patient. That's my identity. So there's no question. And you can go both ways. One thing is you mentioned the hardest to heal patients. I just like you had a patient who had like lupus on their license plate. I thought this is going to be a tough case because when you start to identify with your illness, you're
Yeah.
changing an identity and
Mm.
that's way harder than changing a habit. And but you can flip that too. You can say I am a healthy person, I have a healthy bowel, or you can identify with something that's on the other side of it. And then what you do is say, what would that person do if I'm that person,
Mm.
if I'm a healthy person that doesn't have symptoms of inflammatory bowel disease, what would I do to become that identity? So you can flip it both ways. But I think part of the healing from this is starting with what you just said is do I identify, for example, cancer? You can be, I'm a cancer patient, I'm a cancer survivor. I never speak in those terms
Hmm.
because even now I look back and 20 plus years ago I had cancer, but I'm like, oh wow, that's true. That girl in her 20s had cancer. That's not me. I
Yeah.
don't even identify as a cancer survivor
Well, every
because
cell in
that
your
was
body's been
so
turned
far
over.
removed from my identity. And I think that's part of why I was able to get well because I was like, this is temporary. I'm going to get through this, but I am not a cancer patient. I'm not
Yeah.
even a cancer survivor because that puts me in that place of, and maybe that sounds really bizarre, but it's so
No, it
important, the
doesn't.
semantics.
It doesn't. I want to stamp something and echo what Dr. Jill's saying right now. Your reality is your choice, and no one gets to choose your reality. Not your doctor, not your family, not your best friend. If Dr. Jill chooses that she does not identify as someone who stamped her on the forehead with an idea, which is a man-made idea, not a God-made, it is her right to decide what she does with that identity and what she carries around as trauma luggage for the rest of her life. So I power to you. If you tell me you're cured and you don't have this disease and you don't agree with that idea and that you just might be prone to certain genetic responses, like you could say, I don't have Crohn's colitis, I'm just prone to gut health issues, and that's that. And if that's the reality you want, I am high-fiving you and you go for it because it is your life, your reality, and you choose. And what benefit do we get from carrying it around? There is no benefit. But let's jump into the hard-nosed knocks of what does it take to heal? What are those root issues you continue to see? How did mold play a factor in cancer and
Yeah.
Crohn's? But before I get there, I've been really eager to ask you a question. When you became a medical doctor and
Mhm.
you were going through all this, were you were you being pulled in two different ways? Like what drove you to do all that work and spend all that money and really say,
Yeah.
I'm going to jump into the very thing that may not be serving me, which you
Yeah.
kind of alluded to earlier, because I have great respect for MDs and any doctor. They're brilliant. They're so much better than me at so many things. But how did you choose that path? And what was that story with your healing?
Yeah, I love this story because I really, again, growing up on a farm with the food from our gardens and retired nurse as a mother, I definitely had a more holistic perspective.
Hmm.
And I mean, we went to the doctor if we were really sick, but we'd certainly try chicken soup or herbal remedies first. Like it wasn't
Yes.
like we ran there first. So there was this idea. In fact, growing up, one of my best helps for my health was a chiropractor, right? That
Hmm.
helped my health. And I saw him routinely. And he helped me. He taught me about nutrition.
Yeah.
That was my first introduction to the power of food.
Hmm.
So all that to say, my bent was much more holistic healing. And after I did bioengineering undergrad and knew I was going to go into some healing profession, I looked at
Hmm.
physical therapy, I looked at traditional Chinese medicine, I looked at osteopathic medicine, I looked at chiropractic medicine, and that was my plan. But what happened is I was like, wanted to have all the doors open. So I started applying. I'm like, well, why don't I apply to traditional medical schools just in case?
Hmm.
And what happened was this mind shift because I started getting accepted. I was like, whoa. And for me, there's been no medical doctors in my family. So it wasn't a thing that I had ever had
No.
any idea. But what
Yeah.
happened was there was a shift. There was like, wait a second, I can go this route and get the best reimbursable medical education right now in our United States. It's still the best reimbursed system, right? And if I want to go overseas or do mission work or do anything like that, I'm going to do better as a allied allopathic medical doctor than I am as a alternative practitioner. And again, no disrespect because they have taught me so much,
Yeah. Not
and
at
I
all.
think that
Yeah.
we're all equal.
Yes.
However, I realized in our system right now, the system is set up to reward and allow
Yep.
medical doctors to have the most authority. Whether that's right or wrong, not to me to say, but I knew that. And I literally had this idea, well, what if I kind of infiltrated and took the best of Western medicine, the diagnosis, the trauma work, the things, because we know if you get in a car accident, you have a heart attack, you have a stroke, you want to be in the best Western medical hospital possible because
you want
you're
an
probably going to
MD.
get a quick, good fix for a trauma or an acute injury.
Yeah.
However, if you have chronic complex disease, diabetes, Crohn's or colitis, or anything in those realms, we don't have the answers. So I really did have a mindset going in that I know there'll be things I'll disagree with, but I'm going to take the best of what I can learn. And what I wanted to do from very young, even going into med school, is how can I start to bridge this gap between this? Like I remember my chiropractor saying, Jill, you shouldn't go into chiropractor because we've been so persecuted by medical doctors. So he was of the generation, he was probably 70 when I saw him in my teens. So he was a generation that actually had been fairly persecuted by the medical profession. So he said, don't go this route. And again, that is different nowadays. But I knew that. And I literally created in my medical school, Loyola, the first ever integrative medical club, which brought in other practitioners so that other medical students could experience massage therapy, acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, and all these different other, they called it alternative health back then. But I was instrumental in actually changing our own medical school because bringing in that to the system. And so I went through, and there were times when I just was like, wow, this is crazy. We're just learning about pharmaceuticals when we really should learning about mechanisms of physiology and action. And then during medical training, I came across Jeff Bland in functional medicine, and that changed everything because as soon as I heard the definition of finding root cause, using physiology, using antecedents, triggers, mediators to find out the path of someone to disease and then reverse that, I was all in because I'd already been thinking that way in a systems biology approach, but I just didn't know there was a name for it.
That's the best answer I was hoping for. And what we need essentially is people who create bridges. Everyone, our medical doctors are brilliant, brilliant people. They do certain things, emergency care, physicians, they do a lot of great things. They don't do everything. If we can combine the natural, the holistic, the Eastern, the Western, all together into one, that's when we get the best results. I call it the triangle. Yeah. So you need to be the CEO of your health. And then on your board, you need a expert who helps you build your daily routine, mind, body, spirit, nutrition plan, going after root cause, rebuilding organs, energetics, drainage pathways. Then your conventional medicine comes in there and helps make sense, diagnosis, emergency care if you need. Prednisone saved my life. And I'm sure some of those cancer products did help save your life.
Absolutely.
So it's like, guys, it's a team effort. We need to stop being angry at everyone and do it all. We just want results. Everyone listening wants results, period.
Yes.
What do we need? Let's get results. And so I love that. You're bringing it together. That's what I want to do too. And so I think we're on the same page. Tell me a bit about, and the listeners out there, about that road, that journey to healing. Did you always have this fire inside of you that like, I'm not going to just be on my knees and be depressed and crawl up in a ball? Because I know it was hard, and I know it didn't work perfectly, and I know you had really tough times. There was a lot of uncertainty, and there was a lot of doubt, and maybe even sleepless nights.
Yeah.
What was that turning point? You know, you got these terrible diagnoses. You're 20-something. You're probably feeling robbed of your youth. You know, you're going through all this stuff no one around you has to go through. What was that turning point where you got your hope back?
You know, I love going here because this is where the heart of healing starts.
Amen.
And there's a word called grit out there that's actually been studied for the most resilient people. And some people are born with more than others, but I think we can all learn this. And what it is, I saw this when I read Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. And some of the people who've been through the most horrific suffering I cannot even imagine. Like mine pales in comparison. But in the midst of the deepest and darkest suffering, what they display is this quality of deep compassion and love for themselves and for humanity, and showing up despite suffering with hope, and for me, with faith. I have a deep faith and belief in a higher power, and that has absolutely been a core seeing me through. And it's neat because I write about this in the book, but I write it from a perspective, I mean, I'm definitely a faithful person and have a strong belief in God. However, even if you don't, the idea of faith can be, how do we deal with the unexpected, unexplainable, and lack of control in our environment? So often there's these things that happen to us that are out of our control, and we have these things like insurance policies or whatever types of things we put into place to allow us to feel that we have control over our circumstances, and the truth is we don't.
Mm.
And so the certainty principle, and even in medicine, we're taught to have certainty in our diagnoses. And the truth is, there's massive amounts of uncertainty, just like you described in the beginning. So often there's this, is it Crohn's? Is it colitis? Is it IBS?
Yeah.
And the uncertainty there is very, very prevalent, even
Mhm.
in medicine where we think there's certainty.
Mhm.
So the quicker we can get comfortable with the inevitable uncertainty of life is my definition of faith. And again, I have a strong belief in God. So it's a very prayerful, meditative existence. But I remember even as a little girl, this belief that there was something greater, that my purpose and meaning, like I had a reason for living, and my soul's journey was important. And when I first encountered cancer, I had to grapple with the fact of, well, why is suffering? Why this? But I remember very early in the car, probably 2 weeks after my diagnosis, I heard a radio show, and the person, I think it was a preacher on the radio, said a verse, and it said, "This sickness will not end in death. It's for the glory of God." And I'll never forget, that was a turning point at 24 years old, that I just literally was, okay, there is purpose and meaning. I'm not going to die. And I just have to have the eyes that are open to finding, why is this happening in the way that it can transform me to a better version of myself. And then after that, I had Crohn's, and after that, I had mold, and all of these different things in my life. Now it's easy. I'm like, okay, God, bring it on. I'm ready. And I'm not
Oh, be
afraid of
careful of that
suffering.
one.
No, but I'm at the point now, I don't like suffering, and I hate to
Yes.
see people suffer even
Yeah.
more than myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that I don't care what you describe that could come my way. I no longer have fear of suffering, because what I've seen, even in the difficult, most darkest times, is I have transformed. I have become stronger. I've become more resilient. My faith is greater. And I see over time, it's always good. It sounds crazy to say that, but somehow
It's not
there's
crazy.
such beauty and depth of character development in the suffering that I'm okay with it. I don't love it, but I'm okay with it.
I want to put in layman's terms and echo some of the stuff you just said, because I want it to really hit for all our listeners. How is it, one thing, if Jill, in a different time and space and reality of me, we ended up doing a lot of the same things in the beginning of that heart of healing, as Dr. Jill just said. The first thing I did when I was tired of being sick and when I was ready to heal, I prayed every morning and every night. And I never prayed before.
Yeah.
And I was a kid. I found faith. You said the sooner you can become comfortable in the uncertainty of life,
Yes.
that is faith. And it's true. I got happy and I was still sick.
Yeah.
And I got happy because I had gotten anchored in what happiness really was. Like, I had my eyes, I had my family, I had the sun, I had the birds, I had music, I had tongue, I could speak, I could love, I could comfort, even though I could barely walk, having 25 bloody bowel movements a day. Listen, your life wisdom doesn't come from age. That goes back to people who've been sick for 30 years. It comes from experience and willingness to attack.
Yeah.
Dr. Jill may have been only 24, 25, 26, but she gained a great insight of wisdom and an understanding of life and suffering at a young age, because she had to go through what no one else at her age had to go through. So she got stronger like a phoenix out of the ashes at a young age, and that was her gift. And she knows deeply that there are gifts in the pain to purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
How is it we both found faith, an anchor, found our way to be happy, that it's okay, that I can stay, I can be anchored in okay even with this uncertainty.
Yes.
I didn't have a coach. I didn't have any of this. I had the books, and I was locked in my house for a year, and I had suffered 4 years prior. I didn't get healthy quick. I was in a wheelchair, 120 pounds, just like Dr. Jill, and everything she went through with cancer and Crohn's. That is the heartbeat, because when you get in that space, now you have space and energy to try supplements, to try a nutrition trend, to go meet a doctor, to read a book, to make your own homemade yogurt, to try bone broth, or try coffee enemas, or hookworm therapy, or for biofrequencies. The world is your oyster at that point if you can stay in that rhythm of, thank you, God, my life is still good. I am still happy. My fire still burns. And I'm grateful for this morning. I'm grateful for this day.
And you can always be grateful, right? No matter how sick you
Always.
are, there's always someone who's sicker, and there's always blessings. And shifting that perspective really does change Like, I really believe, I see it now more than I've ever in my life seen it, and I've seen it in my life as we shift perspective and shift into hope and to belief that there's something greater here and belief that we can heal.
Mm-hmm.
I believe universe, God, however you want to talk about it, starts to bring resources, people,
Yep.
answers to us, but we have to be open to that. I can't tell you the number of times where you could call it coincidence or whatever, where I met someone, I heard a
Yep.
phone call, I listened to a podcast, I read a book, I was given in the real time. I believe now this as well. I will always be given the resources that I need.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I look ahead 2 years or 6 months, I might be like, I want that resource, but in real time, if we trust, move forward with hope and faith that we will have the answers, they will be given. And again, it's sometimes unexpected, through a friend,
Yeah.
through a family member, through a physician, whatever
Yeah.
kinds of things, through a podcast like this, where you get a glimpse of an answer or a piece of information that will help you on the next step. I talk about in the book, it's almost like if you're going through a foggy pond with stones, and you take
Mm-hmm.
one step, you have one stone ahead of you, take a step on that stone, and you can see it, and you can step onto it. You can't see the next one. And then all of a
Yes.
sudden the next one appears. And as you're going, you have to just trust that next stone, that next answer, that next resource, that
Mm-hmm.
next thing that you need to get to the next level will appear. But you have to trust, and you have to do this, I call it believe, act, wait. You
Mm-hmm.
have to first believe that there is answers, that there is healing for you, not just Dane and I, but
Mm-hmm.
for you out there listening. There is hope. No matter how hopeless you have felt, you believe first, and then you act. You do what is in your power. My power of medical school, I applied to medical schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you do the thing, or I did the MCAT test. You do what's in your power. And usually the ask, the belief is bigger than you can accomplish on your own. So you have to, at the end, have the wait or the faith or the prayer to trust that God will bring the resources, the people, the other things that you can't do in your own strength. So you do that, believe, do what I can do. I trust that there's going to be answers. You act in whatever capacity you have. Maybe it's getting out of bed. You tell the story of, like, in the very beginning, you had such little strength and energy that all
Yeah.
you could do was this one little thing for today, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
did it. And then you trusted that the next step, the next stone would be revealed. And I love thinking about that, because then I remember my book, I was like, God, who am I to write a book? I don't know what I'm doing. And God's just like, all you have to do, right, is tell your story. And what he happened was he brought the publisher, he brought, like, all the things I needed came. All I had to do was write my story. And I was like, okay, I can do that assignment. So we can make that assignment doable, what's in our capacity. That's all you need to do. That's all that is required. And then
Mm-hmm.
have the faith that the rest of the things that you need to accomplish your goal will come about.
I love it. I mean, we could talk about that for hours because, guys, I think we're emphasizing that because if you don't have that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If I tell you the perfect science of the diet, the perfect supplements, whether it's curcumin, aloe vera, slippery elm, BPC 157, KPV, all these different stuff, mesenchymal stem cells, hyperbaric, it doesn't matter if you don't have that basis. I think that's why me and Dr. Jill are both echoing. If you don't have that, you have nothing. You have to be, because you would need you need consistency, you need a long term, you need the mindset, and then you start taking action, enrolling others, manifesting, listening, questioning,
Yeah.
underlying, writing down in your own journal. And when I couldn't walk, I was still meditating because I was already healed. I was already healed in my head before my body was healed. I take a picture,
Yes.
looked like a dying, war camp patient, but in my
Yeah.
head, I was still the guy who was going to go run
Yes.
10 miles and lift all this weight over my head. So let me ask you this. Some of the basis, I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the basis that really worked for you, like some of the
Sure.
physical, like
Practical.
nutrition.
You got it.
What
Yeah.
worked for you for nutrition? What supplements really were hit for you? And then I'd like to spend the rest of our time about mold, and then we're going to wrap it up, guys, because I know we're running out of time. But for what was the nutrition strategies? Did you try vegan? Did you try carnivore?
Yes.
Did you try
Yes.
AIP?
So I always
What really
say,
helped you?
again, 14, I didn't like meat, stopped eating it. Vegetarianism for me almost
Yeah.
killed me. But I
Oh,
also
yeah.
went carbitarian, right, which was not good for my bacteria microbiome in the gut.
Yep.
So core, I can do this pretty quickly. I realized I had severe SIFO, fungal overgrowth, and I had severe SIBO. This is very common with Crohn's and colitis.
Mhm.
So the first thing I had to do was to get rid of the excess abnormal bacteria. And I had to get rid of the excess fungal overgrowth. And I will say my experience as a medical doctor with Crohn's and colitis patients, I see fungal overgrowth almost as much or more than bacterial. And many doctors are not talking about this.
Yep.
One way you can find out is anti-Saccharomyces antibodies or anti-Candida antibodies or stool test or organic acids. There's many ways. But if you have fungal overgrowth, or even if you suspect it, you must treat that or you will not get well. And so I was on prescription antifungals, prescription antibiotics for some time, and then I switched to herbals. Even to
Mm-hmm.
this day, 20 years later, I have a set of a few herbs that keep my gut stable. And I'm on
Mm.
those probably for life. One is
Oregano,
caprylic
grapeseed.
acid,
Okay.
olive leaf.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on berberine before. I'm not on right now, but those are, and you have to find every patient is individual.
Yep.
So there's no one size fits all. But for me, I found a way to keep that microbiome stable. And the first start was specific carbohydrate diet, and then I switched to
Mm-hmm.
more of a paleo grain-free diet.
Mm-hmm.
So that worked for me, and even to this day, once again, I eat very, very clean.
Yes. Me
That's
too.
my identity. I
Mm-hmm.
don't mind it. It's not a sacrifice, but I stay on that diet 100% of the time. I don't stray off it because I feel good. It's like, who cares what? And I'm getting
I
good
can
foods.
tell
I
you're
have fish
healed.
and chicken,
Like
and
your
my
mom.
diet just at a
Mm-hmm.
core is I don't do any red meat. I don't digest that well. So fish and chicken, primarily protein sources, tons of nuts and seeds. I don't do any grains, although I'm healthy enough now I can do a little quinoa. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Not even weekly, very little grains, very low refined processed sugars of any type, mostly low glycemic, although I've been able to expand that as I don't really have an issue with bacteria or yeast anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And more of the paleo diet would probably be the closest to what I actually eat. No soy, no corn, no gluten, no eggs, no dairy, no sugar, no alcohol, and for the most part, no grains. But it serves me. I feel amazing. So diet was core. Treating the microbiome was core. And this is something often docs are like 6 to 8 weeks. I would say 6 to 8 years. And for
Wow.
sure, 2 or 3 years at the core of treating the microbiome to get that into balance. At one point, I treated parasites, definitely treated mold related illness,
Mm-hmm.
mast cell and histamine issues. In fact, one of the early things, the low histamine diet was a big deal because I was very sensitive to high histamine foods. So, in a nutshell, it's treating the microbiome abnormalities. It's healing the leaky gut, the permeability there, and then eating a diet that sustains you and nourishes you and getting back the micronutrients that you might have not been absorbing during the illness.
I can tell you're healed because I've worked with thousands of people who've been chronically sick, and I know the people who've stayed good for years, and I'm being one of those people. The most important thing you said is this is my lifestyle I choose. It's not a prison. This is
Yes.
what gives me all my energy, all my confidence, allows my spirit to feel safe and healed. Like I'm not waking up paranoid of disease because if you don't step into a life that is nourishing, you're still going to have this trauma. And so everyone, if you're thinking, I'm going to heal and then I'm going to go back to the way I used to be, the imbalances will come back eventually
For
because
sure.
you, me, Dr. Jill, are prone. Our immune system does not do well with high candida, high mold, high dysbiotic bacteria. We'll tend to have a little of reaction. But guess what? So does everyone else. They just don't even know it yet, and it doesn't
Right.
manifest in the same way.
Yeah.
So when you do this, you are actually going to become the best version of yourself. You're going to increase your longevity. You're going to decrease your energy issues. You're going to look younger. You're going to have better skin. You're going to have better hair. You're not going to get bloated. Like literally, if you paid me $1 million to say, make me live to 100 and make me never get sick, this is how you do it.
Yeah, in a way, Dane,
Isn't that
I
crazy?
say this, best thing that ever happened, right? Because
Yes.
what happened is I had to go to another level, and now I am healthier in my 40s than I've ever been in my 20s and 30s.
And everyone else is lagging. It's like
Yeah.
you created a hack where you were way sicker than everyone in your 20s. You built a tunnel under them, and you came
Yeah.
up and you're like, beating
Hey!
everyone. Hey, like I don't have any of these problems. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's exactly how I feel. Guys, I don't have a diet. I have a lifestyle that makes me
Yes.
happy and healthy. I eat very similar to you. I find that when I eat a high lectin, high grain, highly polysaccharide, I just don't need it. I don't get much out of it. High protein, high fat. I do well with red meat, grass-fed beef with
Yeah,
liver,
most people do. That's not a thing,
salmon.
that's just
Yeah.
personal.
Now, I have healed people who choose to be vegan or vegetarian. You do have to take more supplements and take more precautions. There are some benefits, like I find some people do really well with fiber, and you have to be careful of that high carbohydrates because that's a serious issue, and the glucose spikes from all the
Yeah.
plant food. But yeah, that's so big. I do eat eggs still and
Yeah.
a few other things, but I just find, look, if you just keep eating, don't feel like you have to be perfect like me and Dr. Jill right here.
Right.
Just start doing it, and you're intuitively over time going to be noticing like, yeah, I'm better off without that. Like my life is better without alcohol. That's what Dr. Jill's saying. I
Yes,
can
and you're
have
just
it.
like, you don't miss it.
Pay
I
me
don't miss these
$10,000
things.
and I'll go drink, and I'll be fine. I won't get sick. I'll be
Yeah.
fine. But I don't want it.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
want. See, there's a difference between I can't have it and I don't want it.
Yeah.
When you get
That's
there,
exactly it.
you will
I
heal.
have no problem. There's no I love how I feel when I eat well.
I love
And so
it.
it's worth there's no sacrifice.
And so, and she said she started, when you start out with a famous diet, it creates a blueprint that you can work off of. What
Hmm.
I'll do is I'll customize for people. Okay, let's do a
Yeah.
little SED here. Like I went carnivore in the beginning,
Yeah.
mostly carnivore, honey, a little bit of fruit, carnivore. It helped my
Yeah.
skin issues. It helped my,
Yeah.
I had severe candida,
Yes, that's so common.
severe. And Ann Broke, a good friend of mine who had multiple sclerosis, she passed away like
Uh-huh.
15, 20 years ago, not that long, 8 years ago. She told me her root cause, she was in a wheelchair, couldn't move with multiple sclerosis. She said her root issues were Epstein-Barr and severe candida. And as
Yeah.
long as she kept the candida under control, her multiple sclerosis stayed away. And this is like one of the leaders of all leaders of multiple sclerosis. She said that she wasn't sure if the candida or mold was exasperating the virus because she had Epstein-Barr as well, or the
Yeah.
Epstein was the other way.
Right.
So that was a big root issue of because I had cytomegalovirus, candida,
Yeah.
never found much mold, but my ASCA, my anti-Saccharomyces
Yeah.
cerevisiae, was way high.
Yes.
Like I've had clients where I literally, they're on biologics, told they need a colectomy. I do a stool analysis. I find E to the 7th Candida albicans. And I'm like,
Yes.
did anyone do a non-invasive stool analysis?
Right.
No? Oh, well,
Right.
you've got Candida. Let's go on a low sugar diet. Let's get rid of all the Candida, rebuild the microbiome, put you on some light natural herbs. If it's really intense, maybe use, nystatin or fluconazole or something
Yeah.
like that. But that's extreme. Talk to your doctor about that first. But I do the same thing. I use a little bit of oregano, or I use a concoction of herbs if I'm feeling something. And most of us, if you've had autoimmune, need a parasite cleanse. But these are
Right.
all strategically, and you need to do them at the right time. So you did a lot. You keep that lifestyle, and it allows you to stay healthy. It keeps your body in balance. And I think the big thing there is people get fearful of that diet because they go, wait, if I don't eat this way, the disease will come back. That's not a
Yeah.
cure. And you go, if you continue to eat in the Western world, any disease, you name
Yeah.
it, will start to manifest.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be called Crohn's or cancer. It can be
Right.
called anything. If you have someone with Alzheimer's, dementia, boom. And so I think that's the big takeaway. Customize, start conditioning, meditate when you get overwhelmed and you desire those things and say,
Yeah.
what am I needing? And go get better dopamine hits.
Yes.
Like you
Exactly.
don't need alcohol. Go get in the
Right.
sauna. That's a dopamine hit. Go
Yeah.
for a walk, get morning sunlight. That's a dopamine hit. We need to
I got
change
a
'em.
motorcycle and took up rock climbing, but
Oh, you are way more adventurous than me. There's no way I'm getting a motorcycle. I said, I almost died. I got here. I got the life I want.
Enough
I'm
of
not
it.
getting a motorcycle. If I get in an accident after everything I've done,
I'm the opposite. I'm like, I almost died. I can't die again, right? But I mean, that's silly.
I'm kind of envious. I see it's rare, but I'm like jealous. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm not jumping out of any more planes. I'm still young. But I'm like, no, I'm done with that.
Yeah.
Tell me about a little bit about mold. I know we're running out of time here, but I
Sure.
think mold is one of the biggest secret missing links still
Yes.
with bacteria, microbiome, gut lining, great, digestion, great, stress, mold toxicity.
Yes. I'll
What
try to do this
is
in just a
going on?
couple
And I know you have a
minute
protocol of
summary.
Quicksilver, so I want to hear more about that too. But
Okay.
tell me about it.
So, mold toxicity is a very common hidden root cause of autoimmunity, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, and definitely in Crohn's and colitis it can be present. Mold is often in the environment. So if you notice a difference in symptoms when you move to a new home or when you change locations, or maybe more of your family members have allergies, asthma, cognitive issues, or bowel issues, mold is probably the biggest thing that causes mast cell activation, which is also a root piece of leaky gut and inflammatory bowel disease, among many other things. So it's just one of those insidious things that can be in your environment. You don't realize it, and it's contributing or keeping you sick in many ways, including inflammatory bowel disease. So how might you know? Like I said, a good history, if you're looking at when did this first start? When did I used to feel well, and when did I not feel well? And if there's a move or change in location or water damage to your environment, like a leaky refrigerator water line, a washer dryer leak, a sump pump overflow, a flood, any of those things, and you can say, oh, ever since that, I haven't felt well. You might want to do air sampling or dust testing or something to check to see if your environment contains mold. You can also do urinary mycotoxin testing and blood work, although I don't like to rely solely on urine mycotoxins because some of our food contains mold and there can be a past exposure. You can't say just because you have positive urine mycotoxins that you have a current exposure. You just have to know how to read that. And I don't like when people are like, oh my gosh, I had urine mycotoxins. I must have toxic mold in my environment. It's possible. It's likely, maybe even, but it's not certain. And you have to be careful with those tests. But they are out there and you can get them. So what do? You really need to clean up the environment, get out of the exposure, or find the root cause there. And so if you have a place in your home that has mold, you want to clean that up, get a proper remediator, and take care of the problem because you're never going to get well. There's no amount of supplements, IVs, or protocols that will outweigh a chronic exposure. So the most important thing above any supplements or nutrition or plan of detox is to make sure you know the source and you aren't exposed every day, day after day. So air quality is huge in this, and we don't even know sometimes the air that we breathe is our most toxic exposure. So I always say just start with clean air, clean water, clean food. We touched on some of that. And mold detox is pretty simple. You get the liver upregulated, just either producing more glutathione or taking glutathione. You can take precursors like N-acetylcysteine, alpha lipoic acid, and milk thistle to support the liver. You want to support the bowel function and detox through the bowels if it's appropriate, and you can tolerate binders can be helpful. Things like clay or charcoal or extra fiber. I wouldn't recommend that in a Crohn's flare, so that's a whole different ball game. Be careful, work with a provider that knows what they're doing. But you can stop the exposure and you can start to lower the sugar in your diet and some basic things that would be helpful.
A lot to say there. Mold. Here's the big takeaway for everyone listening right now. It's very hard to find mold in your lab work. And
Yes.
it's one of those things where people are going to think you're crazy in a way. Like, it's mold, and they're like, what are you talking about? And even when you do your ERMI air sample, that it can be hard to find, like in-wall air sampling can really be big. And then just going and changing, because it's very expensive. Remediations and all this, like, wow.
Oh,
like
crazy.
$1,500 just to check the house, and then you got to remediate the bathroom. That's $20,000. I mean, it's crazy. So certain things like MDF wood, medium density fiber, fake wood, all these new houses are built in this. If that's MDF under your sink, in your kitchen or up in your bathrooms, like, just look where the water is and start even considering remediating where there's water.
Yes.
Fridge, bathroom.
Yes.
You might be able to just get it, and then for me, I've always kind of pushed my air samples to try to be in-wall air cavity samples. So I'm like, look, I think there's mold. I'd rather just spend more money and time just in like sampling in little spots of the drywall around my like my bathtub or something like that. You just have to know where to look, and you can save yourself thousands of dollars. And you're talking about air. Is there a specific type of air filter that you like that you think really works for mold? I mean, there's Air Doctor, there's IQ Air.
You want both a HEPA filtration system and a VOC filter, because the VOC takes out the mycotoxins and viruses and small particulate that's like 2.5 microns and below, whereas a HEPA is the larger particulate. Air Doctor's great. I have Austin Air everywhere in my house and work. Those are great. IQ Air, those are the top 3 that I like. And there's others out there, but I would be cautious about, there's these new ones out there. I won't name any names, but they use UV light in that, and those are great to prevent growth. But if you have a mold issue, that UV can react with the particulate in your air and actually create an oxidative species that creates more issues. So be cautious about those unless you know you have a clean room where there's no mold. Don't use them to remediate a moldy environment, because you could make that irritant in the air worse.
Yeah, you can't kill mold. I think that's a big conception. You have to get rid of it.
Yes,
you have
correct.
to get rid of it. Don't try to kill it.
Right.
And a few things I just, I've spent a few $1,000s trying to unlock the whole mold experiment myself. And a few takeaways that would have saved me money is like, first things first, if you have a really old carpet and there's been spills on it, just get rid of it.
Yes.
If you have a carpeted room, spend the money getting rid of the carpet. Just pull up the carpet and put wood down. You're probably going to find mold under it, and that'll probably save you thousands. And I know it costs money.
I would agree. Carpet is the notorious harbor of all kinds of awful things.
Carpet rugs. And then like, the MDF wood, anywhere there's water, start looking around, changing things out. Another thing that I think is a really big point. If you were talking to anyone who just wanted to reduce their chance of any disease, live a longer life, they were dealing with chronic fatigue, whatever, would you recommend that anyone, no matter what their experience, go through, put the time, the energy, and the money to learn mold, look at their house, identify, remediate, and put that effort in for anyone?
Ooh, I've never had that question, Dane, but I think that's brilliant, because I saw, and I was so careful after my experience to not project that onto anyone I saw, but what happened over and over and over, cognitive issues, mast cell activation, inflammatory bowel disease, cancer, you name it, I would find, oh my goodness, mold is here again. And I would say maybe 80% of my patients with complex chronic disease had mold as a either massive factor or a distinct contributing factor. So I started being like, yes, we need to. So I would say, yes, Absolutely.
I agree. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I was leading you up to that, and I agree with you. But here's the thing: if your immune system is robust and your drainage pathways, like your liver, lymphatic, kidney, and all that, are open up, you might not get the mold symptoms, but the
Yeah.
mold is still there. And
Yeah.
then you also got to think, well, mold is in the woods, and people lived in the woods for thousands of
Right.
years. It's like, well, they also died at 25 years old, so we don't
Yeah.
know. But I agree with you. It's like everybody who wants to live a robust life should spend the time, energy, and money to understand mold and work on their house, because it's like all cause mortality goes down.
Yeah.
All
And the way we're
all
building
cause.
homes, you said construction matters, the quickness of construction, like
Yeah,
between the
hardwood.
amount of hurricane storms and then the construction, there is an increase. And what you mentioned about being in the woods, dilution is the solution to pollution. So if you're outside, the pollution, the dilutional effect of mold is so great that you almost never get the concentrations that'll create illness. So you can have massive outdoor mold issues, but you don't get sick because the air quality, there's so much air there versus indoors where there's, efficiency of buildings and the air exchange is less. So it's always more common indoors to get sick from it because of the air exchange and you're concentrating the effect of a toxin.
Dr. Jill, this is so amazing. I could literally do this for 3 hours with you, and we could
I
look.
know.
Well, I feel like we'd solve the world's problems, but that's
Yeah.
probably just a
Me
high.
too.
It's just a high. Tell me about, where can people find you, and anyone who wants to work with a doctor or work with your team or anything that you're doing. How can they learn more about you and get connected?
Thank you, Dane. From the moment we talked on my podcast, it's just been a joy to get to know you and to be here talking again. Yeah, my main
Thank you.
website is just my name, jillcarnahan.com. It's the place with all the blog posts, the podcast, everything else you can find there. I do have a book out that was released last year called Unexpected: Finding Resilience Through Functional Medicine, Science, and Faith, where I detail my journey through cancer and Crohn's and really give practical guides on how to do it yourself as well. And then last year also my documentary, Doctor Patient, which is at drpatientmovie.com. It's now free streaming on YouTube and also on Amazon Prime. So if you want to watch that and hopefully be inspired by my own journey and that of my patients, it's just drpatientmovie.com.
Watch it, guys. It's really awesome. I mean, talk about story times 10.
Yeah.
It's all linked below. Check
Yeah.
out her documentary. Amazing. This is what we need to heal the world. We need leaders like you, Dr. Jill. Thank you so much for coming on. God bless. Hopefully we'll have you on again in the future.
Thank you, Dane. Appreciate all the work you do as well.
God bless. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for checking out our content. And if you liked it, please like, subscribe, and share. It greatly helps us out. And if you need personal help with IBD, IBS, or your gut health, you can go ahead and schedule a session with our team to deep dive on your case and your needs and how we can get real results. I'll put a link right around here or below. And just remember that you're not alone. Please reach out and connect. We can do this, but more importantly, we can do it together. Happy healing.